Welcome to Conversations. I'm Scott Turner. Our guest today is a noted entomologist with, to quote J.B.S. Haldane, an inordinate fondness for beetles. He's a taxonomist, not a taxidermist. He's a former professor of entomology at Cornell University, was keeper and curator of insects at London's Natural History Museum, although keeper is not really a title I'd usually associate with insects. He is former vice president and dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Arizona State University. He's a conservationist, scientist, author, and since January, president of the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry here in Syracuse. Quentin Wheeler. Quentin, welcome to ESF.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
I'm glad. So I wanted to start by asking you about your experience at Arizona State University. During my misspent youth, I used to spend a lot of time roaming around looking at different colleges, and this was many years ago. And at the time, Arizona State had this kind of air of being a kind of a party school, you know, not very serious, and University of Arizona was the really serious one. And since 2002, when Michael Crow became president, Arizona State has undergone the most amazing, actually breathtaking transformation. It's become a world leader in social insect biology, biodesign, all sorts of transformative things there, and you were in the thick of it. So
yes.
How was that?
It was a transformative experience, not only for ASU, but for me. I learned just a tremendous amount by being on Michael's team. My college, Liberal Arts and Sciences, for example, during my tenure, we initiated 5 transdisciplinary schools where a larger number of departments were before.
Did it go smoothly?
Yes and no. For the most part, actually, yes. There was one of our schools that had a little bit of a rocky start. And in part, as dean, I was using this as an opportunity to make some corrections in my budget. And that put a time frame on it that was unfortunate. If I had had another year to prepare the faculty, I think all of them would have gone very smoothly.
So in general, the faculty were right behind you on this. Then that's quite interesting because, you know, academia has this very strong love of its traditions, rightly so, and sometimes that can lead to resistance, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, and so you know, how did you manage to bring the faculty along there?
Yeah.
How did you respect those traditions?
That part was actually fairly easy because Michael Crow created an atmosphere where one expected change and rapid change. And most faculty quickly saw that this was an opportunity to seize good ideas, to adapt to a changing environment, to to realize their ideas on a pace that normally doesn't happen. Along with my faculty, I shared some trepidation about this rush to transdisciplinarity because while it has enormous potential to solve societal problems, I agree with you that those disciplines exist for a reason, and they do protect bodies of knowledge and ways of understanding the world that we've got to be very careful that we don't undermine in the process. And I don't think it's an either-or situation, but it is important to respect the disciplinary foundations.
Yeah, this becomes very important in the kinds of things that you've been involved in conservation, because, you know, as you are well aware, in biology especially, there's been a relentless push towards the reductionist, towards the molecular, towards the cellular aspect, and the traditions of natural history. You know, the people working at their dusty cabinets and their microscopes and that sort of thing. That's an image that is embedded in the public and makes it hard for them to see just how important it is. And so, did you have any experiences along those lines? I mean, did you have to sell the value of these disciplines to skeptical colleagues in the public?
Yes, and it's something that I'm still engaged in salesmanship about. I'm firmly convinced that there are important things about the world that are emergent properties of complexity that we can only understand by approaching it in what you correctly describe as a traditional natural history approach. whether it's studying behavior or even odd ecology, understanding thoroughly how any given species fits into a complex ecosystem, or understanding the evolution of complex anatomical structures. None of these things are clearly derivable from DNA data alone. And so while it's incredibly useful and powerful as an additional tool, it's not a supplement, it's not a replacement for what we really need to know about biological diversity.
Yeah. And what was transformative about that experience for you?
Well, that's interesting. At ASU, for me, it was gaining a deeper appreciation for transdisciplinarity and for what that actually means, and understanding, as someone who had been trained fairly narrowly as a scientist, to appreciate more deeply what the humanities and the social sciences have to tell us about the relationship of humans to nature, and realizing that even the very best and fullest scientific information is not nearly sufficient for the kind of conservation challenges that we face.
Did you have a road to Damascus moment where the scales fell from your eyes and as you see the world in a different way?
Well, I wish the world worked that way. It was far more gradual, and there was probably a moment of realization that this stuff really is important. Exactly where that happened, I couldn't reconstruct.
Yeah. Was it? But you don't know if you can't recollect if it was in the presence of an inspiring artist or a particular individual, or just
I think it was a slow accumulation of realization.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So when you left Arizona, you went to London, I believe, right? No, London was before.
That's right.
It? Yes,
that's
okay.
right.
So at London, you were a keeper and curator of insects. Were you beginning to see some of these transdisciplinary issues that you thought might be important, or that are important to you now? Did you start to see them then?
Not as clearly, and we were fighting different battles in London. This gets back to your comment about the rise of molecular genetics and the strong shift of resources away from natural history endeavors into those molecular ones. And natural history museums are at the forefront of that conflict. On the one hand, they're charged with the preservation and use of an incredible resource. Most of what we know about biological diversity on the planet is contained in those collections. And yet every signal they're receiving is that they should ignore those and put emphasis on molecular studies instead. And so we have not yet reached the appropriate balance between those, between generating this new data that's incredibly important, but not at the same time neglecting what those collections can teach us that molecular data can't.
Yeah, the conflict between molecular and actually organismal biology is quite an interesting one, because most of the public deals with biology as organisms, after all. You know, that's the most impressive thing about them, and yet all the money goes to the molecular side, and I imagine you had to fight quite a number of battles there with funding agencies, with the public. Did you have any interesting encounters with the public trying to convince them of the value of this?
No. The public is an easy sell. That one is a no-brainer. They love natural history. They self-select to come to a museum like that to enjoy specimens, whole organisms, and learn about them. And so that was not a challenge. And my staff, I had a staff of about 130 entomologists. All but a handful were like-minded. And I had many lively debates with those handful on my staff who ran our molecular lab, which was a very valuable resource within my department. But we did have different views. I had one staff person who once made the statement at one of our staff meetings that the museum should never acquire another whole organism.
Well, on that note, our guest today is Quentin Wheeler. We are talking about transformation, academic, scientific, and societal. This is Conversations. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Conversations. I'm Scott Turner, and our guest today is Quentin Wheeler, and we're talking about transformation. Now, the transformation that was going on at Arizona State was fundamental, and as I said earlier, almost breathtaking in the way it changed its reputation. But transformation is something that's happening throughout the entire enterprise of higher education. And Glenn Reynolds, who's written an interesting book called The New School, is probably the most recent person to make the point that our academic model is an industrial age model. It was borrowed from Germany. We bring in students in batches. We march them through in curricula, a very industrial age assembly line kind of metaphor. And he's made the point this is totally inappropriate for the information age. And so I wonder if you could reflect on whether we're going through a transformation. Is academia in a crisis, transformational crisis? What do we need to do?
Sure. I'm not sure I'd use the word crisis, but there's no question that the terrain is changing and changing rapidly. How the academy ultimately chooses to use digital resources, for example, is yet to be determined. And it would be healthy, frankly, for various universities and colleges to experiment with the full range, from totally online sort of delivery to hybrid uses in between to restricted uses on the other hand. My personal feeling, and this is shaped on my experience, which was during another time when this sort of environment wasn't happening.
Mine too.
Leads me to feel that if you're trying to access data or you're trying to access information, I can't think of a more efficient way than going online, and with the right databases and search engines, you can get that information. The problem is, as a student or frankly as a researcher, I often don't know the right questions to ask. If I knew the right questions, I might find the answers online. And there's something about the apprenticeship of working with seasoned professors and scholars and being led, and also working with your peers, being around other students who are equally curious and asking those questions that maybe didn't occur to you yet. And so there's something incredibly valuable about being part of that social fabric of discovery that I'm not sure we can package and deliver online just yet.
Yeah, this is the big irony. The ideal for an academic, a teacher, is Socrates in the olive grove. You sit down with a group of students, you engage in a conversation with them. That personal interaction is very important, and yet in this industrial age model that we have, we can do it in some circumstances, but we cannot do it in others. Do you have any thoughts on how we can bring back Socrates in the olive grove to the online world?
Right. Well, this is something I hope we find the answer to. I'm not sure what that answer is yet. Certainly, trying to find more engaging ways of drawing students in and awakening curiosity about areas online. But there's something about human-to-human communication, and it's that passion and that enthusiasm for the subject that's infectious in a classroom and is difficult to capture on film. One could argue maybe the very best performers in Hollywood come as close as possible to emoting those human responses. But even there, it's not quite the same as being in the presence of someone and having that intellectual awakening. And I'm somewhat skeptical whether, I hope we get there, because then we can make this experience available to anyone. Yeah. And we certainly should try. And even if we fall short, it's still a noble endeavor to open up the world of inquiry to the general public who may not have the ability for their life circumstances to perhaps participate on campus.
We all know the goal. We want to be able to inspire students. We want to be able to be good stewards of our culture. We want to be able to transfer that culture and love it to others. But the crisis, I use that word deliberately because there are other things that are actually driving us towards a crisis point. Among them, student loan levels, for example, increasing levels of competition, the prospect that you will have a Hollywood star out there that's going to come to dominate a particular body of knowledge that then will endanger our ability to do this person to person as we would like to see happen. So how do you see, I mean, there's a very definite interplay between these larger societal issues and the ideals that we would like to pursue and the technological environment in which we're working.
Right.
Any thoughts on how all those things are balanced?
Only that I'm losing sleep over this. I mean, it is not a comfortable moment because we can't accurately predict how all this will sort itself out. Yeah. Our culture in general is too enamored by celebrity, which becomes a double-edged sword. On the one hand, we can get people's attention, we can get mass media coverage by succumbing to that, and we're also losing the attention of a lot of the public if we don't approach it that way. Yeah. And maintaining the rigor of serious scholarship, but reaching the attention, increasingly short attention span of the public, is no small feat. And I don't think anyone could predict exactly what the equilibrium will be. But that industrial sort of model you described was well suited to a reductionist approach to science and carving nature up into tiny bits and understanding those, realizing that putting them back together doesn't reveal the whole, means that we do have to fundamentally change. And the natural world is changing so fast, we don't have the luxury of sort of standing by and seeing how this plays out, but rather need to be actively engaged in experimenting and trying to quickly find what works and adopting that.
Yeah. One of the interesting dynamics that's going on in higher education right now is that because information is so much more widely available and because people can use the internet as a very prominent platform, and because we want to appeal to the public and we want to be able to serve the society that supports us, there's a worry that the traditions of academia are crossing from an ideal of service into political activism, and this starts to, the worry then is that you start to politicize really important scientific issues such as climate change, such as species loss, such as exploitation of natural gas, for example. And one of the difficulties is how do you convince the public in this that we are the trustworthy sources of information? Right.
The political weather changes as fast as the weather in Syracuse, and there's it's dangerous to get too involved in that. And I think it's incredibly important that the academy be seen as a trustworthy, reliable, objective source of information. It's our job to explore science, to understand the world, to explain what's happening, what our options are. But it's societal responsibility to take that knowledge and decide how to use it. As individual citizens, we should be advocating the outcomes that we think are best for society. Yes. But as institutions and as professional employees in institutions generating this knowledge, it's incredibly important that we maintain the trust of society by letting science lead us where it does, regardless of whether we like that.
Just a very quick answer. Do you think the Academy is doing a good job of that right now?
I think we're doing a mixed job of that right now.
Right. Okay. On that note, this is Conversations. I'm Scott Turner. Our guest is Quentin Wheeler, and we are talking about transformation. Welcome back to Conversations. I'm Scott Turner, and our guest today is President of the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, Quentin Wheeler. Quentin, you're an author, conservationist. You started off as a beetle taxonomist, and you're the author of a very interesting book with Sarah Pennick, What on Earth? And I have to tell you, the thing that I most appreciated about this book was that it brought charisma to the microfauna. You know, one of the big problems that anyone in conservation faces is that everyone gives money to the charismatic megafauna, but very few people pay attention to what are the really important species. And I thought your book did an excellent example of that, although I was a bit dismayed that my favorite insect in there, which is the dizzy dean spider, Mastophora dizzy deani, was not included. But you know, as you said, you have to make choices, and I thought the choices were very good. And this was in part science, but also public relations. Was that foremost in your mind? I think it was. Wasn't it?
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. My discipline, taxonomy, has been out of fashion for about 25 or 30 years, and I'm trying to find ways of bringing that message to the public that this is fun, it's exciting, and it's incredibly relevant to the issues facing society, and that we really shouldn't be neglecting the fundamental inventory of life on Earth.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned you had some rather loud conversations with colleagues about which ones to include. Were there any particularly contentious species that you had to worry about?
Most of those loud conversations were with my co-author Sarah, actually, because it's really difficult to. We limited ourselves in this book to 100 species named over the last 10 years, but that means that we were dealing with 180,000 more or less. Possibilities, and it's tough to narrow that down to 100.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that the slithering crawling species, or 2 million slithering crawling species, are a good start, and of course, there are probably at least 10 times that many undescribed species out there, and practically, how's that happen? How's this project work? How do you actually catalog the biodiversity of the Earth?
Well, that's an enterprise that was began by a Swedish botanist, Carl Linnaeus, in 1758, and it's been plugging along ever since. Up until the first half of the 20th century, it was on a very strong positive trajectory of increasing the pace at which we were discovering and describing things. About World War II, it stalled out, and there's a long list of historical and sociological reasons that may or may not explain that. But the fact is, since the 1940s, we've named about 18,000 species a year pretty steadily, in spite of the fact that we believe species are going extinct at hundreds of times the rate that was probably happening in the 1940s. And the fact that we're making crucial decisions about the natural world that should depend on knowledge of the rest of those species. So,
do you think we're going to be able to go fast enough? I mean, we're on this kind of crossing trajectory of discovery versus extinction.
The problems are not scientific, they're not theoretical, they're not technical. The problems are sociological. If we make this a priority, we have the technology, we have the know-how, we know exactly what needs to be done and how to do it. We could easily increase the rate of species discovery by an order of magnitude overnight. And that would allow us to do a first-pass inventory of the estimated 10 million or so unknown species within 50 years, which would arm humanity with the data it desperately needs.
Yeah, which brings us to our third aspect of transformation, your presidency at ESF, and so obviously you came here because you think ESF can play an important role in this transformation. I wonder if you could elaborate on your thinking about that.
No, ESF is a remarkable institution. Not only does it have a century of leading and actually doing things about what we now have come to call sustainability. And when the college was founded, it might have been referred to as proper stewardship of the natural resources around us. But it's the same idea. How do we meet human needs while not destroying or so diminishing natural resources that we eliminate opportunities for future generations of humans to also enjoy a good life? And I don't know of another institution that is so consistently focused on those fundamental questions, and that's what drew me here. In addition, ESF has maintained excellence in what you referred to earlier as natural history, whereas a lot of other institutions have not. And I think that actually gives us a leg up on some of the challenges that lie immediately ahead. And it certainly gives us credibility to address those issues in a way that a lot of other institutions, I think, have abdicated.
Yeah, yeah. You're clearly a taxonomist, a very good one and a very prominent one. And What on Earth, of course, addresses that in a very compelling way. But of course, there are more issues than taxonomic, and more areas that ESF can contribute to this kind of thing. So what do you see as the big questions that ESF can address?
Right. Well, I'm challenging the faculty to answer that question for me, and I'm very excited and anxious to find out what the faculty think the answer to that is. I think it would be useful for ESF to focus its energy by identifying maybe half a dozen of those answers. Mm-hmm. And it could be this stewardship of the natural world. It could be better understanding how ecosystems can remain resilient and have enough diversity to adapt to whatever changes may lie ahead, and we can't even predict what many of those are. Mm-hmm. Renewable energy sources is another area where we have some stiff competition in other institutions, mm-hmm. but may have some unique approaches here, and particularly with a forestry background. But in all of these, I think what we need to do are ask the broad questions that lead us to discoveries that guide us to answers in whichever of those areas we decide we want mm-hmm. ESF to be most known for. Yeah. We're small enough that we can't do everything, and yet by being small, we're nimble. Mm-hmm. So as unexpected opportunities arise, we're able to seize those and act on them in a way that a larger institution couldn't. Mm-hmm. And so I think the answer is going to be a strange balance of opportunism, doing what we can, where we can, mm-hmm. but also staking the ESF flag out in certain areas where we think we can have a very special role in leading society to the right answers. Yeah.
Where do you see just the lone scholar in all this? Because
exactly.
it's all very nice to talk about mobilizing an institution to societal needs and ends, and it's an obligation that we do have. But how do you deal with the lone maverick?
As I'm guessing you're painfully aware, academics are not the most well compensated people in our society. And one of the reasons to go into the academy is the incredible opportunity to pursue your curiosity, to mm-hmm. pursue science wherever it leads you. Mm-hmm. And that intellectual freedom is something that has to be guarded. And while it's useful to stake out areas that help brand the college, that help attract visionary investors who want to solve these problems, those things should be broad enough that under those umbrellas there's enormous opportunity for faculty to follow where serendipity or their scientific course of study leads them. And that's something that we'll ferociously guard.
Well, on that hopeful note, I'd like to thank Quentin Wheeler, our guest today, for joining us in Conversations. This is Scott Turner, wishing you a good day. This is Conversations.